And this afternoon, we have a panel and a dialogue on public safety and housing, and I will introduce them in just a few minutes. I would like to, though, at the outset, recognize someone who, all of you are very important to President Obama and very important, obviously, to this country and to all of us who are here in this dialogue. But there is a person who was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom on August 12, 2009 by President Obama. He is Joe Medicine Crow from the Crow Nation, and I would like him to come up here so that we can recognize him for the great contributions that he's made to this nation and to this planet. Joe Medicine Crow. You go ahead.
Say something? Kahe, 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 to you who have come from the four directions of the wind. You have come to exactly the right place and the right time. When Senator Obama was in the Indian country in August, I think, last year, he said, I am going to help you Indian people. You have been second-class citizens too long in your own country. It's been said that BIA means bossing Indians around. But he's going to change that. Among other things, he's going to change here to bringing Indians around. So today, he is doing that, has brought in Indians, where Indians all over great white fathers camp here. I saw 4 teepees out there already. So we are in the process of taking back our country. So let me say to you, young Indian leaders of the various reservations, to do your very best to make this great country even a better and bigger country. But one trouble, we Indian people are our worst enemies. We're just like a pail of lobsters. When one tries to come out, the others drag him down into the gutter. You know what I mean, you leaders of the tribe. In the olden days, when tribal people come to see the great white father, there'd be just a few elders. But now, as I look around, a lot of young people, a lot of young women. Yeah, they're already experienced in running their own reservation, women, so now they're here. But that's all right.
Aho, aho.
Or say, aho, aho, thank you, thank you.
Again, that's Joe Medicine Crow, awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom on August 12, 2009. Give him another round of applause. So we have our continued efforts here. Did everybody enjoy the morning? Is it going all right? Going all right? We want some more. Thank you so much for continuing with us. We have one other panel, and then we will hear from the President again, and then from Kim Teehee and some of the other White House staff about how we will move forward. At this point, this panel is on public safety and housing, and we are privileged to have Deputy Attorney General David Ogden, who is here with us today, the Deputy Secretary for Housing and Urban Development, Ron Sims, and the Deputy Secretary for Homeland Security, Jane Lute, and the Associate Attorney General, Tom Pirelli, and also U.S. Congressman Tom Cole, and U.S. Congresswoman Stephanie Herseth Sandlin. So give them all a round of applause. You know, we have spoken about many of the issues that are facing Indian country. We speak about jobs and poverty and economic development. We speak about the tough issues of healthcare which we face. And we also often speak about the very difficult challenges in law enforcement and justice that we're facing in Indian country all around the country. The Department of the Interior and the Department of Justice, through Attorney General Holder and his staff, have been working through the summer and fall to develop a coordinated strategy to address the delivery of justice services to Indian country, including addressing the critically low number of law enforcement officials in many areas of Indian country. The Department of Interior's budget, which the President signed into law, I think, on Saturday morning, includes a $33 million increase for justice service programs. This includes $10.5 million. That's good. Money's always good to hire people. It includes $10.5 million to strengthen the law enforcement presence on Indian reservations and staff where we know there are critical shortages all across the country. We also, in this department and across the Obama administration, are committed to enforcing the laws that protect cultures, histories, and sacred places. Earlier this year, Assistant Secretary Larry Echohawk joined Attorney General David Ogden and other law enforcement officials as we traveled to Utah for the culmination of an unprecedented undercover operation led by agents from Interior's Bureau of Land Management and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The agencies rounded up what prosecutors call a ring of archaeological grave robbers who looted sites in the Southwest, desecrated ancient American Indian burials, and stole priceless artifacts, selling them to dealers and collectors who were associated with the network. When Larry Echohawk was asked at the press conference what was the value of these items that were stolen, he had a one-word answer to those in the press corps that day. He said, priceless, priceless. And so we, in this administration, will make sure that we are enforcing the law. The operation that we took on struck a major blow against a criminal enterprise responsible for wide-scale theft and desecration of cultural sites and artifacts, and it sent a message across the country that we will protect the law, that we will enforce the law. The Housing Improvement Program Housing received $20 million in recovery funding to provide new energy-efficient homes for Indian families designated as the most in need of housing assistance. Native American-owned businesses are already putting people to work on these construction projects. I want to say a couple of words. David Ogden and Tony Pirelli, who are here from Justice, we do a lot of work together on matters relating to Indian country, and they are both part of President Obama's team and part of Attorney General Holder's team that will make sure that the issues of public safety and civil justice are in fact something which we make a reality under the Obama administration. Jane Lute, the Deputy Secretary from Homeland Security, works hand in hand with Secretary Janet Napolitano, and there are many issues with Homeland Security that we need to work in partnership with Indian country on. And we are joined today by two leaders of Congress who care and work on Native American issues, and they include Congresswoman Stephanie Herseth Sandlin, who has spent a long time working on the issues of South Dakota and ensuring that Indian country is at the table, and Congressman Tom Cole as well, who has been working on these issues for a long time. So what I will do is I'm actually going to start with Stephanie. We'll just come across the panel this way. They'll go ahead and they'll give opening statements, and then from what we will do is there are a number of people who had asked to have an opportunity to ask questions, so we will call on them for questions, and then we'll try to respond to them. So why don't we start with you, Congresswoman, and we'll just come down this way.
Well, thank you very much, Secretary Salazar, for hosting us here today and for your tremendous leadership already in the first few months in your position. To be a leader here at the Department of Interior, and specifically the leadership that you have shown in making the commitment that the White House has pledged to make and has clearly followed through on for our Native peoples. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be here with my good friend and colleague, Congressman Cole, and with members of the White House team and throughout the administration to talk about issues so important to all of you and to us as partners in these endeavors. I'm South Dakota's lone member in the House of Representatives. I have the honor of representing the whole state, which means I have the honor of representing all 9 sovereign tribes, Sioux tribes, that are located all or in part in the state of South Dakota. And I special welcome today to those leaders who I've had a chance to work with now for a number of years for their dedication, their tireless efforts, the great working relationship and counsel and advice that they are so willing to share with me on a daily basis. It's an extraordinary honor to represent you in Congress. Our government-to-government relationship has been established, as we all know, by our founders in the United States Constitution, recognized through hundreds of treaties, and reaffirmed through judicial decisions, executive orders, and congressional action. Fundamentally, this relationship establishes the responsibilities to be carried out by one sovereign to the other. That's why I'm so pleased with the commitment that President Barack Obama has made in hosting this White House Tribal Nations Conference so we can address critically important issues facing Indian country. After many prior years of neglect and insufficient resources, the Obama administration has demonstrated a renewed commitment to addressing the chronic problems plaguing Indian country. This panel, as we know, is dedicated to public safety and housing, and there couldn't be 2 more important issues for our communities in South Dakota. Everyone deserves a safe and decent home. Everyone. Yet sadly, in many parts of Indian country, the federal government has failed to provide the resources to tribes to meet this basic need. In particular, as I've learned through the valuable time that I spend in communities, Great Plains tribal housing authorities face difficult challenges. I was proud to vote for the Recovery Act earlier this year, which includes the $510 million for Native American Housing and Self-Determination Act funding and $20 million in BIA's Housing Improvement Program. However, these resources will only begin to address the backlog of need to renovate and replace and expand the housing stock on many reservations. Now, equally importantly, public safety has reached a crisis level for many tribal communities in South Dakota and across the nation. Native American families, like every family in this country, deserve a basic sense of safety and security in their communities. Law enforcement is one of the federal government's trust obligations to federally recognized tribes. Yet, as the tribes represented in this room today know all too well, on many counts, the federal government has failed to meet this obligation and has failed to do much of anything for too many years. Tragically, there is a pervasive sense of lawlessness in many parts of Indian country. Less than 3,000 law enforcement officers patrol more than 56 million acres of Indian country. Let me repeat, 3,000 law enforcement officers for 56 million acres. That reflects less than 1/2 of the law enforcement presence in comparable rural communities. On many Indian reservations, officers respond to emergency calls without backup and travel to remote locations without even adequate radio communication. The situation is particularly dire for large land-based reservations. Tribal leaders in South Dakota know full well and have indicated to me time and again of the officers on the reservations in those communities who cover hundreds of miles each shift. For example, at a 2007 Natural Resources field hearing in South Dakota on tribal law enforcement on the Lower Brule Sioux tribe, many tribal leaders across the state testified at that hearing. And the Cheyenne River Sioux tribal chairman at that time testified that his tribe had only 3 officers per shift to cover 19 communities and 15,000 people spread across an area almost the size of the state of Connecticut. The sheer size of these reservations, coupled with understaffed departments, outdated equipment, and oftentimes high gas prices, strain tribal law enforcement efforts. Clearly, the extent of the problem far exceeds the level of appropriations and will continue to worsen until the federal government dedicates the resources necessary to address these problems. We must address the complex and broken system of law and order in Indian country. So one of the steps I've taken to address this need is to introduce the bipartisan Tribal Law and Order Act, which is a companion bill to legislation introduced by Senator Dorgan of North Dakota in the Senate. Congressman Cole is an original co-sponsor of this bill. And I thank him not only for his support of this important legislation, but his very important seat on the Appropriations Committee that will be necessary once we reauthorize many of the programs within this comprehensive bill. The bill clarifies responsibilities of federal, state, tribal, and local governments with respect to crimes committed in tribal communities, increases coordination and communication among those various agencies. It does a whole host of other things that I think you're familiar with, and I don't need to go into detail now as it relates to some of the unique circumstances we face throughout these communities. But as you know, last week at the Tribal Nations Listening Session on Public Safety and Law Enforcement in St. Paul, Attorney General Eric Holder announced the administration's full support of the Tribal Law and Order Act, and wasn't it great when President Obama himself reiterated that support this morning? That will ensure that we get it done. It's moved through the Senate committee. It's going to go to the Senate floor, and we hope to have hearings. We hope to have hearings in the House Resources and Judiciary Committees very soon, and we're going to be working very closely with Kim Teehee and with the White House to coordinate a strategy of moving the bill through the House. Clearly, this alone won't solve the problems raised by tribes in these consultations and these hearings, and I'm going to continue to work for increased funding for law enforcement personnel, detention facilities, equipment and training, our court systems, all of the necessary components for a successful judicial system. I'll continue to hold the BIA accountable for upholding the trust accountability responsibility within the realm of law enforcement. So in conclusion, let me just say again, Native American families, like all families, deserve to raise their children and live their lives with a basic sense of safety and security. Congress must act to fulfill our trust responsibilities, and ultimately I believe that this bill and other tools will help us in our shared goal of meeting these needs. I look forward to the rest of the session, and again, thank you all for your leadership and your dedication to improving the quality of life throughout Indian country. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Congressman Tom Cole from Oklahoma.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. And I'd like to know anybody in this audience that could say no to Stephanie Hirsch of Sandlin. I'm certainly not going to on both the legislation that she mentioned and the appropriations which she will be back to ask for. Let me just start and make a couple of comments, because I think where you start really determines usually where you finish. And when I look at most of these issues, and I try to tell this to my colleagues, all of whom believe very deeply in their constitutional responsibilities. Look, if you've sworn allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, you've sworn allegiance to Indian sovereignty, whether you know it or not, because it's in the Constitution. And that's the basis of where we should start. The first responsibility of governments, the security of its citizens. And that's absolutely the first reason why they're formed. And we have an enormous challenge, clearly, in Indian country. And I really do want to thank Stephanie for the brilliant work that she's done on behalf. This is a wonderful piece of legislation. And she not only recruited supporters, she worked with other members as they brought the concerns of their specific tribes and their particular areas to the forefront. She's just an excellent, excellent legislator. We're very fortunate to have her. When I think of the law enforcement issues, I break them down into 3 or 4 categories. The first one is just jurisdictional, and we all struggle with what are the limits of our jurisdiction, what are the limits of the jurisdictions of those around us, and how do we cooperate and overlap. I think that's a particularly challenging area for those that work in justice and law enforcement. And I want to tell you the administration understands that, and they're working on it. And Stephanie made, I think, major steps in the right direction to clarify those kinds of issues in her legislation. Second is administrative. Writing the law is one thing, but actually administering it, having the ability to enforce the law, to have a court system, to have all the things in terms of evidence collection that you need is both expensive and complex. And I think we've had less resources and, frankly, more complexity than any place else. Third is just cooperation. Again, probably in Indian country, more than any place else, the need to cooperate with federal authority, state authority, and local authority is more difficult. And frankly, quite often our law enforcement personnel understand that. Quite often, frankly, federal and local and state law enforcement don't. And I think a special effort to educate them in how that's done and why it needs to be done is appropriate. And finally, and Stephanie touched on this, is financial. At the end of the day, we all know that you have to have the resources to put the cop on the beat, so to speak, or the judge in the courtroom. Some of our tribes are very fortunate in terms of, and I'm from a tribe that's been rather fortunate in terms of its economic development, the Chickasaws, but that's not true in every place. And so the ability to make up for shortfalls in resources is a federal responsibility under the Trust Act, and one that we need to take very seriously. Long term, I would like to see us move toward what seems to be obvious, that is, Indian law enforcement officials ought to have the same authority over non-Indian peoples on Indian land that, I grew up in a family and they said, look, when you see somebody with a badge and a gun, just say yes, sir, and no, sir, and what can I do? And frankly, I think our law enforcement officials ought to have that same sort of authority. I think that would frankly ease a lot of the problems that we have in terms of prosecutions and punishment. The second thing I'd recommend really is, and now, again, I guess I probably ought to just be your campaign chairman today, but passing 1924 is a big deal for us, and the Senate's done a great job, and this is something we really need to work through the House. But Stephanie has done a terrific job. And finally, the commitment I'll make to you, and I can't make this commitment by myself, but I have to tell you, I work for, and I say work for, a great guy, my chairman, Norm Dix, who has done an unbelievably good job in Interior across the board, but particularly in directing resources into housing, into law enforcement, into health care, an unprecedented effort to try and catch up on the real backlogs that we have in all 3 of those areas. So I look forward to working with you. It's a pleasure to be here with my colleagues. And again, Mr. Secretary, and to the President through you, thank you so much for hosting this and putting this on. It is a huge deal to all Native Americans, and we're very, very grateful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both for your leadership in the U.S. House of Representatives. And now for Eric Holder, Tom Pirelli, the Associate Attorney General. Tom.
Thank you, Secretary Salazar. I want to thank you and the President and echo Congressman Cole's comments. It's just an extraordinary gathering and thrilling, not just that we're having it, but that we're having this in the first year of this administration. And I also want to thank all the tribal leaders who are here today, as well as the representatives from many of your communities who came to the listening conference that we held last week with representatives across the federal family. It was an extraordinarily enlightening experience and very exciting, I think, for all of us to see the beginnings of what we hope is a partnership that leads to a new era in the relationship between the federal government and Native American communities. So thank you for stepping forward and being part of this partnership. We all know, I think, we have a lot to do. And I'm honored to be here with my great friend and colleague, the second ranking official in the Department of Justice, Deputy Attorney General David Ogden. And it's good for both of us to be working with all of you again. For those who, 10 years ago, we started down this path trying to improve public safety in Indian country. And I think when we came back in 2009 to pick back up again, we found that many of the same problems remained. And the Justice Department's commitment has been and will be that we are going to change that. And while we have gone through a listening process and we are going to consult and make sure that we are working together on solutions, I think we all recognize that action is what's required. And we spent much of last week trying to determine some of the things that we will do. And I know David's going to talk a little bit about some of the things we are doing and will do. I'll talk a little bit just at high level about the approach we're taking, I think, on law enforcement and public safety in Indian country. And it obviously starts with the core principles of this is a nation-to-nation relationship. We have to respect and honor that. Tribal sovereignty is a cornerstone of it, and that Indian self-determination is the end goal in virtually in everything that we do. And we embrace the trust responsibility. And for us, that means really two significant things. One is we have to do our job better. That means doing a better job in communicating with you about law enforcement investigations. That means doing a better job about getting adequate resources to reservations and tribal communities that need to help, doing a better job in our grant making, doing a better job as we develop new and innovative solutions, and we're very focused on that. But it also means in the long term building tribal capacity, really echoing some of the comments we heard last week and we heard this morning. Tribal communities are going to know best how to solve their own community's problems, and if we can, over time, build the capacity of tribal police forces, tribal courts, I think we'll go a long way to improving the situation in each and every community. Congressman Cole talked about partnership, and I think that is a cornerstone of this as well. It's great to have representatives across the federal government here together because we really are working in partnership, and particularly the Department of Interior and the Department of Justice are trying to work in lockstep on improving our efforts in law enforcement in Indian country. But there's also the partnership between the federal government and tribal governments and tribal people that we can never forget as we move forward, because as I said again, I think most communities, and tribal communities in particular, are going to have the best sense of how to solve problems. But the last piece of the puzzle, and again, Congressman Cole talked about this, and this was discussed quite a bit in the morning, which is that the states need to be part of these partnerships as well, particularly for Public Law 280 states, but other states as well. We have to recognize that there remain the jurisdictional gaps that exist today, as well as just the need for partnerships and resources. And our hope is that from the platform of the Justice Department in support of tribal communities, we're going to be able to facilitate and work with you to build the strongest possible federal-state tribal partnerships that are consistent with Indian self-determination and sovereignty, but solve real problems on the ground. The last thing I comment on would be the President talked a little bit this morning about violence against Indian women as an assault on America's conscience. This, in the 15th anniversary of the Violence Against Women Act, we intend to put a relentless focus on violence against Native women because it just needs to end. So across the entire spectrum of prevention, enforcement, services, we look very much forward to working with all of your communities and across the federal government to do what's necessary, because we all know that if we can take real strides in reducing the incidence of domestic violence and sexual assault, improving the lives of the children who are affected by that, we can have a dramatic impact on people today and in generations to come. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. And Jane Lute, the Deputy Secretary for Homeland Security.
I think I'll stand up here so everyone can see me. I come from the middle of 7 children, and I've always struggled to be seen. It's a great honor for me to be here today and to represent the Department of Homeland Security and Secretary Napolitano, who very much regrets that she couldn't be here, but sends you her greetings. We want to thank also Secretary Salazar for hosting us here, and it's a great privilege for me to join my colleagues in the administration and distinguished members of Congress in addressing you. I have several key messages that we want to communicate from the Department of Homeland Security to this audience that has for so long, so much longer than any of us, called this land home. The Department is committed to improving our relationship with Indian country and committed to improving and strengthening government-to-government relations with the tribes. You are valuable partners to us in our effort to secure the United States. More than this, in our effort to create a safe and secure, resilient place that we all can thrive. We're taking concrete action to improve our relations with you. Secretary Napolitano has ordered the creation of the department's first ever tribal consultation policy, as the President announced this morning, and this policy will soon be published in the Federal Registry and open for public comment. Earlier this week, I signed out a directive to component heads and office directors requiring that they all designate a dedicated tribal liaison before the end of the year. This means that in the Coast Guard, in Secret Service, in TSA, in Citizenship and Immigration Services, in Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, in Customs and Border Patrol, and in FEMA, there will be a dedicated tribal liaison office to attend to the issues to which we are jointly committed. Indeed, during the past year, FEMA has made many strides forward to include tribal nations in policy, programs, grant-making, and training. These efforts are not limited to simple representation on committee or focus groups, but reflects a deep commitment to government contacts to deepen our understanding and to share the knowledge that we jointly have in securing this homeland. Administrator Fugate will host a tribal leaders listening session on Friday morning to continue the consultation process with tribal nations. We look toward the other components taking similar actions. The purpose of this session will be to discuss disaster funding, the Stafford Act, government-to-government relations during declared disasters, and other issues which we know you place a high priority on. We've been making improvements to our Tribal Homeland Security Grant Program, which will provide direct and has provided direct funding to tribes. FEMA is also taking the initiative to improve tribal relations in the recent decision by FEMA Regional Administrator Nancy Ward in Region 9 to create a permanent, full-time tribal liaison office. This is the first full-time regional tribal liaison, but it will surely not be the last. As part of the department's outreach to the more than 800,000 men and women at state and local law enforcement activities, we will work to integrate tribes into fusion center activities. Tribal nations remain critical partners for state and local fusion centers, particularly as they relate to border security and illegal smuggling. We will work with the Department of Interior, as we have been, to create a tribal terrorism liaison program for law enforcement officials, and we are also expanding the provision of security clearances to tribal chiefs of police. We are actively partnering with tribal colleges and universities to expand relations and identify opportunities for training and collaboration. Finally, We continue to sponsor the Shadow Wolves, and I honor them here today and the work that they do in securing this nation, an elite law enforcement unit of Native American trackers that patrol the Tohono O'odham Indian Nation. The Shadow Wolves' primary mission is counter-narcotics smuggling, but they represent the very best that this country has to offer, and that the very best of government-to-government collaboration in addressing these key issues. We are a young department in Homeland Security, but we're an enthusiastic department and one that is committed to drawing on the wisdom in this room, again, from so many of you who have for so much longer than any of us called this land home. Thank you.
Good job. And now we will hear from the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, David Ogden.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I appreciate very much your allowing Tom and me to double team you and all of you today. It is a great honor to join you, and I am very grateful that President Obama has made the federal government's trust relationship with tribal nations and this key issue of public safety a particular focus of his administration. And if there's one short message that I hope you will take from my remarks and from Tom Pirelli's remarks this morning, it is this: we at the Justice Department, together with our partners in other federal agencies, want to work together with you, together to bring effective law enforcement and justice to tribal communities. The Attorney General is deeply committed to that message and to that mission, and he regrets very much that he couldn't join us today. Tom Pirelli and I, the Associate Attorney General, have been committed to and concerned about these issues now in 2 administrations, as he suggested, and it's a real honor to be here with him, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing from you about the ways in which we can best work together. Last week in Minnesota, Attorney General Holder convened a listening session, as Tom mentioned, with tribal leaders to discuss the public safety challenges in your communities. What we heard there and in the annual consultation on violence against women confirmed the grim statistics. Native Americans face unacceptable levels of violent crime, including violence against women, children, and elders. For too many years, we have done far too little about it. The Justice Department is already responding to the serious issues you raised last week and in past consultations and in conversations, and as the Secretary said, in teamwork with our fellow agencies. Here are some of the things that we're working on. The Attorney General announced a permanent Tribal Nations Leadership Council to advise the Department on public safety issues. And the tribal leaders themselves in 12 regions will select their representatives. We are making permanent our Office of Tribal Justice and creating a Native American Issues Coordinator within the Executive Office for United States Attorneys. We have already received funding for addition victim specialists in Indian Country for fiscal year 2010, and we are seeking funds for more FBI agents and more federal prosecutors as well. We will add a national training coordinator for Indian Country. As has been mentioned, we strongly support the Tribal Law and Order Act, which will strengthen law enforcement in tribal communities and which will help institutionalize some of these reforms. We're developing policies to improve communication between our U.S. attorneys' offices and tribal nations, and are committed to develop a plan to bring the federal justice system geographically closer to Indian Country. We're developing an initiative to enhance enforcement of tribal domestic violence protection orders. We're working to reform our grant-making procedures to better serve tribal governments. And we are working with other federal agencies on taking a coordinated approach to these issues. So I look very much forward to hearing from you today about how we can work together to make a real difference. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And now Deputy Secretary Ron Sims from Housing and Urban Development.
Secretary Salazar, thank you for bringing us all together today. And it's an honor to be here, not only because I get to see my friends from the state of Washington, but it's also very personal. My Nana is of the people of, she's Powhatan, the people of Pocahontas, and my grandfather was mixed blood from the people of Pocahontas. And I've always promised my mother I'd make her proud. It's also an honor to be here on behalf of the Secretary Donovan to discuss HUD's commitment and as a part of President Obama's administration to empower Indian country to more effectively address the challenges you face in your communities, in your schools, and in your homes. But this commitment is more than just words. In March, Secretary Donovan addressed the membership of the National Congress of American Indians. In May, Secretary Donovan visited Montana with Senator Tester to gain firsthand understanding of the state of Native American housing and how HUD's programs on the ground work. And in August, Secretary Donovan visited rural Alaska and learned about the challenges facing the Native Alaskan community. Though through the Recovery Act, HUD has made $500 million of investment in Native Alaskan and Native American housing and community development efforts across the country, putting funds into the hands of communities who needed it most. We also support the needs of Indian country through the following programs: Indian Housing Block Grants, Native Hawaiian Block Grants, Indian Community Development Block Grants, loan guarantees for Indian and Native Hawaiian housing, and guarantees for financing of tribal activities. Additionally, we're working on a variety of other initiatives important to tribal communities, including improving financial education, using housing as a platform to address health care and domestic violence, and expanding awareness about tribal housing and overcrowding. But as my good friend Billy Frank said when I walked in, he has trained me to listen. And so I am here because it is important that we listen, and that because our goal is simply to forge a much stronger relationship with the Indian nations of this country than we've ever known before. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you to all of the panelists. You know, as maybe a first test of our nation-to-nation relationship here, the nations have said to us that there are 9 of you who have organized yourselves to give some comments to all of us. And so what we'll do is we'll hear from the 9 people whose names I have been given by you first, and then we'll have the panel respond, and then we'll have hopefully still some time when we can just do interaction with whoever else is here. So there are 9 of you that we were told want to talk to us, and they are, so if maybe you can just get ready and try to, if you keep it down maybe to 2 minutes, but here they are. So Chairman Charles Murphy, if you will go first. Go ahead, Chairman, give him the microphone. And then just following him, we'll have Chief James Ransom, and then Chairman Leonard Maston, Jerry Isaac, Chairman Ron Allen, President Ron Johnson, Gary Hayes, Juana Mahel Dixon, and then Vice Chairman Ben Shelley. So there are 9 of you. If you could maybe do 2 minutes, and then we'll respond, and then we'll hopefully have an opportunity to get some questions from some others. So Chairman Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. First of all, I want to thank the President for having this special meeting with the tribal chairmen throughout the United States. One of the issues that we have on, not only on Standing Rock, but within the Aberdeen area, which covers North and South Dakota, Nebraska, is that we have a lot of suicides. And there's another thing, that our law enforcement is not there. For example, my tribe is made up of 2.3 million acres, which is the size of Connecticut, about 4,000 square miles. back in 1928 and 29, we had more police officers then than we do today. We only have 7 on our reservation right now. Our reservation is 100 miles by 100 miles. It takes about 2 hours to get to any accidents or domestic violence, or whatever it may be. It's really sad, Mr. Secretary. We only have 2 police officers, sometimes at night, to cover the whole reservation, again, which is 2.3 million acres. We're asking for your support, your help, not only in this area, but all the areas that was mentioned earlier this morning and again this afternoon. So with that, thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you very much, Chairman Murphy, and now Chief Ransom.
Thank you. I'm a tribal chief with the St. Regis Mohawk tribe. My comments are directed towards the Department of Homeland Security. And in particular, I welcomed the remarks that talked about the government-to-government relationship with tribes. However, FEMA doesn't operate that way. And that if tribes need funding or to declare emergencies, we have to go through the states. And that needs to change. My question for Homeland Security is, will it provide funding directly to tribes instead of through states? And will you allow tribal leaders to declare emergencies consistent with criteria that we jointly develop with Homeland Security?
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
I have a couple of other comments. On a tribal-specific note, I wanted to use this opportunity to send my tribe's support for the recognition of the passport of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. I'm not here speaking on their behalf, but I am offering our tribe's support to them. Their passport is recognized in countries around the world, and it's even been featured in National Geographic. I believe it's right and proper for the United States to recognize their passport. Finally, Secretary Salazar, I wanted to give a message to you that I hope you'll give to President Obama, and that's that there's only 3 countries that have not signed the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And that's Australia, Canada, and the United States. I would ask you to ask the President to sign the declaration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Ransom. And then Chairman Maston, right there in the back in front of the cameras.
Thank you. I'd like to address my questions. It's on Public Law 280 for the state of California. I am one of the tribes in California that is under Public Law 280. And since I'm glad to see some congressmen here because it was Congress that enacted that law, Public Law 280 in 1953. Public Law 280 needs to go. Since you're making laws, there's another one. And it's not only for the 110 tribes that are in California that are recognized, there's about 30 more that hopefully throughout this process that will get their land back in California also. To move on California, because it is a Public Law 280 state, when you do enact laws for money, we're exempt. A lot of those monies that come down for states, Public Law 280 states are exempt from receiving those dollars. We all live in California, most of us in rural areas, to where like the other gentleman was saying here, that our backup is 2 hours away, hour away. And we have a tribal police department, but we're totally dependent on tribal dollars to support our own department. And when the county cuts back, like now, the recession that we're going through, the first people that are cut out of those budgets are the deputies that respond to the Indian reservations. And that's not right for everybody that's talking here on domestic violence, the child molestation. We have the same problems that everybody else does throughout the state. So we would really like to see, if you are going to give dollars, that you don't exempt the Public Law 280 states until we're done away with Public Law 280, which I hope will happen soon. We have a meeting this month in Southern California where we've had several, but we're still talking to do away with Public Law 280, or how we're going to get around it and provide more money for our reservations in California. So my point is mostly on Public Law 280, and I hope under the Obama administration, I'm one of those ones that's sure he'll be there for 8 years also, that we will finally see a Supreme Court justice that is a Native American. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Maston. Jerry Isaac, up front.
Thank you, Secretary, for allowing the tribes in America to address you directly. We have many issues, as you have heard throughout the day, throughout the last few months that you've been having sessions to extract concerns from Indian country. I'd like to say thank you to President Obama for having the real courage to make real the promises made to Native Americans. I'd like to thank the agencies for being here to listen directly to the Native Americans. We've prepared a written statement, but because of the statements made by the agency staffs, it has somewhat changed, because the message here is to provide you with a real glimpse and the chance to experience literally the conditions that Native Americans live with. However, it seems that you have, to some extent, experienced that already. So the mode that I'm going to use is going to be somewhat different. All I want to say is to make real the promises that has been made throughout the years, over and over. Native Americans have been pressing hard to address these concerns that fell on deaf ears and went unanswered. You know, stuff like rural Alaska and the rest of Indian country ask for your assistance to address the shockingly high rate of domestic violence and sexual assault suffered by our women and children. Rural Alaska and Indian country suffers from the highest rate of domestic violence and sexual abuse in the entire nation. Alaska and Indian country also suffers from the nation's highest rate of suicide among the youth. As a leader, I have made the commitment to openly and publicly take the position of advocating to protect our women and children. As leaders, we have remained dangerously silent for too long. Our silence is an abandonment of our leadership responsibility. Our inaction is no longer acceptable. Those suffering are not statistical numbers. They are our daughters, our mothers, and aunts, cousins, children, and families, our tribal members. Today, we ask your agencies to join my commitment, our commitment, to address these problems. The solution is not complex. All it is we need adequate funding for an effective police force, funding for tribal courts, and funding for prevention programs. We ask for this funding regardless of land status and regardless of jurisdiction. This funding is not merely money to our women and children, but funding means safety, security, and well-being for our people. It is a relief to have heard President Obama this morning regard the violence against our women and assault to our nation. It was a relief to hear our president take serious concern about the safety of the Native people of this country. For the sake of all Native families, I pray your agency will take real action. I ask the federal agencies to join the tribal governments to address these problems meaningfully. I ask you join my commitment, our commitment, to change the treatment of our women and children. I ask this on behalf of all American Indians, Alaska Natives, the Native village of Tanacross, and even my family. We need meaningful participation in all policy development. We need to start encouraging interagency real cooperation on management of federal programs and federal agency responsibilities like BLM, Fish and Wildlife, National Refuge, and this stuff. I thank you again. In closing, I appeal to you. I really, really am asking that you as the Secretary make right the commitments made long ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Jerry. We have 5 more speakers here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each panel member maybe to respond, take the 1 or 2 top things for about 1 minute, because I'd like to get some of the other audience also to ask some questions. So our next questioner is Chairman Ron Allen. Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. As you said, my name is Ron Allen. I'm the chairman for the Jamestown S'Klallam tribe in western Washington state. I got 2 quick issues I want to raise with you and particularly DOJ specifically. I think that our congressional leadership and our tribal leadership has articulated, the deficiency of our public safety problems we have, which is inclusive of our court systems. DOJ did a great job at the listening conference last week, and we identified that there's many issues. Number 1, as a result of '94 with President Clinton and the listening conferences with Janet Reno, there was an effort to try to collate law enforcement from BIA and DOJ. That did not work. So my challenge to you and request to you in terms of how you're responding is how DOJ and DOI will collaborate to elevate the base funding for law enforcement and courts and youth protection services that are essential for our programs. And we do need more money. The courts have been leveled off for 25 years. So that's one challenge. The second is as a result of these atrocities that are going on here. The Chairman Maston from California raised the 280. There are a number of atrocities that have come down through the Supreme Court. The Williams-Lee, the Plains Commerce Bank, the Atkins Trading Company, the Cotton Petroleum decision, and last but not least, the elephant in the room. That case has got to be reversed. This is about our sovereignty. This is about our authority. We need you and DOJ to advance with the Congress legislation to reverse the impact of those decisions that were inappropriate coming down from the Supreme Court, to reaffirm the tribe's sovereignty for the protection of our people and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And Ron Johnson. Ron? Okay. Let me see. Gary Hayes. Gary Hayes from my home state of Colorado and the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe.
Senator,
Good to see you.
Secretary, we miss you as our senator.
I miss you too. Washington's a long way from home.
Exactly. What we'd like to do is ask you to talk to the president. There was 24 senators that signed a letter last month regarding public safety. And what we'd like to be able to do is you go back to the president, ask him to look at that, review that letter, and to look at the 2011 budget What we're asking is above baseline budget, so it's critical to addressing the public safety and basic health care in Indian country. We ask that you do everything in your power to honor the federal government's responsibility and commitment in these areas. In this letter, it references last year's report that was contracted by the Department of Interior, where it recognizes the lack of facilities for construction and rehabilitation of facilities throughout Indian country, and the estimated cost of over $8 billion. You know, we realize that how important it is to construct these facilities, but what's really critical is the prevention and treatment that needs to go along with it, the O&M cost that it takes to operate these facilities. And I'm glad to see there's different agencies here, but I believe Dr. Rubidoux is here also. What we really need is the prevention and health and the treatment for our people, whether it be traditional or non-traditional. That this is a vicious cycle that we need to reverse and give the tribes the opportunity, the funding, and resources necessary to be able to overcome this. And for decades, this has been lacking. And we hope that with the interagency cooperation, the multi-agencies come together, Interior, and also with HHS, also with Department of Justice, also with Department of Education. We need to get together because the lack of resources, if President Obama wants to be able to balance the budget, he has to make cuts. So what we have to do is you have to partner up with the different agencies, utilize the resources so that we can move forward in a positive way in taking care of our people and the prevention and treatment of our tribal membership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary. Juana Majel Dixon. Juana.
Excuse me, I'm standing in for Juanita. My name is Chris Devers, the chairman of the Palma Band of Luiseño Indians in Southern California. And I want to thank you for this session today. But we've heard a lot of, we respect, we honor, we recognize sovereignty. What I haven't heard a lot of, and we've heard a little bit of, the president's budget has allowed for increased. But what concerns us as you talk about public safety is a timeline. When can we expect something? We come here to Washington, D.C. to meet with the leaders. We hear the same thing, but at what point in time can you give us a date when something will be completed and we will have resources to do what we need to do on our homelands? And what are the repercussions if you can't come through? Who gets relieved of their duties? Because, you know, as the elder said, you know, these are our aunts, our sisters, our children that are out there. And this continues to happen. And we continue to come back and say, we need help. But there's never no timeline as to when that help is going to actually come. Okay. At the end, if you can respond to that and let us know what that process is going to be, when we can expect this assistance that we're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And Ben Shelley from the Navajo Nation.
Thank you. Once again, thank you. I'd like to just tell the tribe and some of the tribe that came aboard, new leadership, the Navajo Nation, and also the panel there, that the Navajo Nation is a pretty good sized reservation, 26,000 square mile, and it's the size of West Virginia. Now, we were talking a while ago about a large land-based tribe. Could you imagine with the size of West Virginia? And all we have is a little bit of public safety, our law enforcement, our fire department, and so on. Our facilities are 50 years old. They're run down. They can only hold 6 people, and the population is growing. Do I need to say any more? And crime grows with it. Plus the unemployment, the recession, poor economy, it adds on to all the abuse that you are talking about. It increases, it costs us money. What the priority of the public safety in Navajo Nation is the public safety facility funding. We need to build new jails or detention center. The other area is our law enforcement. We can create jobs by hiring some more law enforcement, by funding them, salary in that area. And then the number 3 is support for tribal system, grant making process, TA, communication, data sharing. Number 4, coordinating resource, Safe Trail, Task Force, Safe Street, Project Safety Neighborhood. 5, grant, meth, gang, community outreach program, and on and on and on. The nation is running it. We're asking the Department of Interior, the congressional people that are in concern of the nation, are working with the tribal government. We are doing what we can. We are in lack of fund. But if we can do more together, I do see a little bit of hope where I see there is emergency fund for Indian safety. But again, lastly, we request your administration to fund it and authorize the emergency fund for Indian safety for $400 million a year for a total of $2 billion over the next 5 years. But my problem with this and any other funding is that it's an unfunded mandate. You give us hope that there is money out there, but in most cases it's unfunded. And that's where we run into problem. And then we start looking at each other. Is what I heard truth? And if you're doing something, working with the tribe through government to government, partnership, consultation, for God's sake,
Thank you, Ben.
talk for real with a funded mandate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Is Ron Johnson here? Ron? Let's see him. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. A lot of questions, and I think the first one was directed to Homeland Security. So I'll give her the easy one. And we'll just go down, and if the panelists will indulge me and just take about a minute and a half mostly in answering questions, because I'd like to get some of the other audience also involved in asking us some questions. So Jane, why don't I start with you?
Thanks very much. Chief Ransom will know better than I do the restrictions that we operate under the Stafford Act with respect to funding, but I want to underscore what I said in my remarks, that we are committed to improving the resources that are available to the tribes for emergency response and Homeland Security, including grants, but also training and other opportunities. We want to have an intense dialogue in this regard on the basis of government-to-government consultation, and so we are committed to pursuing that, and we can speak afterwards if you would like on how to make that real. Thanks.
You take my colleagues from the Department of Justice, so Tom and David, if both of you can take a quick minute, and then we'll go to the Congress men and women. David?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the questions and for the comments. All extremely helpful. I believe Mr. Allen asked, how will DOJ and DOI collaborate to elevate funding for court systems and other related services, and asked about other legislative priorities in the jurisdictional area in particular. And we also had the question about timing. When can we expect change? And other observations about the need for coordination among federal agencies. Say this in the minute I've got. We recognize the urgency of these issues. We recognize that we have a responsibility collectively as the federal government to respond to what is an urgent situation that is involving lives on a daily basis. We have begun, as the Secretary mentioned, working very closely with DOI on policy issues and on budget issues, and recognize the need to present a coordinated budget, and we're working together with other agencies, including other ones here on the dais and others who are not, to present a unified approach to these issues. Our very earliest discussions in this administration have been focused on this issue. So in terms of the timing, we're beginning now to try to implement what we can implement, and we are working now to put in motion initiatives that we hope will bring lasting change.
Stephanie and Tom?
Well, just a quick response on the interagency cooperation issue that relates to a number of the comments that were made. I have every confidence in the conversations that I've had with Secretary Salazar, with Jody Archambault-Gillette, and Kim Teehee at the White House, that they are going to make every effort to work with all of you to enhance interagency cooperation. But Congressman Cole and I think, would agree that the same has to happen in terms of intercommittee cooperation in Congress to make sure that as there are efforts in the executive branch to increase coordination, baseline funding levels, the same has to happen in a cross-committee appropriation strategy that I look forward to working with Tom on as we talk to Chairman Obey and Ranking Member Lewis to do it. And when you listen to Chairman Murphy or others explain the situations, this is it provides the perfect example of why we have to do more in this area. Many of you are familiar with perhaps what happened recently with the Dakota Peacekeepers project under the prior administration because of the spate of violence on the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. A surge of BIA police officers goes into Standing Rock. Those BIA police officers are coming from other reservations, many of which also face serious safety considerations in their communities. They come in, people feel more safe, they're making more arrests, but going to the issue of deteriorating facilities, they don't even have a juvenile detention facility to house these youth in. They have to be transported down to the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe or even further away. Then you have to deal with the court system. Then the surge goes away because we can't sustain that if we don't hire more officers, if we don't address the housing situation, because we can't even recruit BIA officers if there's no housing available for them in some of these smaller communities away from where headquarters or the larger communities are on the reservation. COPS grants run out. Pine Ridge lost 2/3 of their force a few years back because they were encouraged to go after COPS grants. Those are shorter-term grant programs. We all know that. And so the experience that we've seen then with when the surge goes away and the enhanced sense of hopelessness among some of our youth because of the high unemployment, because of the pressures of gang activity, that then lead to suicide. This is how it's all interrelated. You all know best, as was said before, how to address these concerns, but funding is the key. And it's our responsibility to do the cross-coordination among the committees to help the administration as they coordinate the baseline funding levels to increase to ensure that those resources are there.
Thank you. Congressman Cole.
I know we're short on time, so let me make 3 points. As I listen, obviously there's always the concern, legitimate, historically based, that, gosh, we hear all these things, but where's the money? To the President's credit, the President offered really a terrific budget that was substantial increases, and frankly, to the Congress's credit, in justice areas, it went beyond even what the President asked for this year. So you're going to see extra funds coming beginning next fiscal year. And it's pretty substantial. We're talking tribal justice funds up about 17%, tribal court funds up 25%, the money that's in commerce, justice, and science toward Indian programs, Indian law enforcement programs, is up over 60%. So real dollars are behind some of these expressions of goodwill. Second area that I think we really need to work on, and I think this is one of those areas of unintended consequences, we've pushed justice in the last several years. This really came out in some of our hearings on appropriations toward a lot of grant-based funding. Well, that's great if you got the matching money at the other end, but a lot of our reservations and tribal governments don't. Some do, but some don't. And I think we've pushed some funding without thinking through the mechanisms, and that's a congressional problem we've really got to wrestle through, but it began to get some attention this year for the first time. Final point, at the end of the day, and every tribe in here knows this, if you rely only on federal money, then you're going to always be disappointed. You know, we have 200 and some odd years of this deal. So the best thing to do long term is to also do what are the other things we can do to encourage tribal economic development so that funds are available that are self-generated. I think there's an awful lot we can do. We got a terrific fight on 8A contracting. It's very important to tribes, but ways to help tribes become self-supporting is ultimately the only way we'll get each tribe to where it wants to be and needs to be in terms of supporting the services that are desperately needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We run up against a time crunch here because our next panel is going to start in about 10 minutes. So what I want to do is I'm going to just take 3 or 4 questions in general, and we'll try to close this up. So I'm going to ask you to keep it kind of short. So I'm going to go first. I'm going to go to the first woman whose hands I see right there.
I'm Stephanie Thompson with Alexander Creek out of Alaska. Tukunkak is our traditional village. The question I have for you is there are people that aren't here, that our voices are not being heard. A few of us up in Alaska and the lower 48 are still trying to get tribal recognition. And because our natural resources were very sought after, we had a hard fight. Many of us were qualified and are qualified still. And I would ask for your help. Because of this administration, we're very thankful that our voices are finally getting heard. I was able to speak to Kim Elton and Larry Echo Hawk's assistant, Wheezy, and I am appreciative of that, and I just wanted to speak for them. Please, we need your help. Quiana, thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Down in the middle of the paper, yes, right there. Go ahead. Right in the middle, standing up, yellow shirt and tie.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, Congressman, Congresswoman, guests of the panel, and thank you, Homeland Security, for all the funding you've given my tribe. I'm from the Pueblo of Isleta in New Mexico. My name is Robert Benavides. I'm the governor for the Pueblo. I just wanted to talk about law enforcement. I'm retired from law enforcement. I retired in '93 from law enforcement from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So I know what the problems are. I've been to Wounded Knee. I've been to the Wounded Knee trials. I've been to Minnesota on the Red Lake Reservation. I've been with Mr. Mastin during the fishing seasons. And I've been and seen all of the problems that there are in Indian country. For those of you that don't know the history of Indian law enforcement, in the 1980s, they had a reorganization of law enforcement. And this is what tribes don't know. I was at a listening hearing in Denver, Colorado 3 years ago, and I was surprised that they know nothing about Indian country. We talk about funding, but we need more funding. $10 million is not going to cut it for Indian country. I've been to South Dakota. I know what the gentleman is talking about. I've been there myself. I've patrolled hundreds of miles to get to a disturbance call. And when you get there, the crime has already been committed. When the crime has been committed and you're waiting for the FBI or the agents to come out, they don't come out till 2-3 days, maybe a week later. By that time, by the time you write your report, they rely on what you've wrote down and what you've seen and what pictures you've taken. And because of poor reports that are going to the U.S. Attorney's Office, these cases are not being prosecuted. Why? Because of inadequacies within the system. When they reorganized law enforcement in the 1980s, there was never no government-to-government consultation. There was never no government-to-government consultation. The only consultation that took place was testimony from the investigators themselves that took care of themselves in their pockets, I'm sorry to say. And I was a part of that group. I was in the Uniform Division. I was not in investigations. If you look at the records and if you see the congressional records, you'll see what I'm telling you is the truth. And we need to do something with law enforcement in Indian
Governor, if I
country.
may interrupt you, what you would hope then is that as we move forward with these law enforcement initiatives, that we make sure that there's a consultation process with the tribes.
Thank you.
Got you? I love you, Robert. Okay, somebody over here on the left. Back in the back, standing up. Standing up. Jumping up and down. That's you.
Hi, Secretary Salazar. I had to come here. I came running. I just finished my second judgeship as a tribal judge. I'm a state licensed and tribally licensed attorney. I came running over here. This is what I have to say.
What is your name?
My name is Angela Delorme. Bonjour. Guanagobacoedishnikos. I'm from the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. This is my chairman, Richard Marcellet. He allowed me to come in here today, so it's my fault. Here's what I have to say. I've served 2 judgeships now. I've dealt with the rapes. I've dealt with the children missing. I've taken children out of boarded up houses and recovered them under ICWA. I've done that 3 times. I've adopted a child that was born addicted to meth. I stayed up with this baby. Okay, every night, both of his parents they're done. They're never coming back from meth. So I live it, I breathe it, I cry it, I'm here, and I'm qualified. And I just came out of federal court defending tribal sovereignty, and I won. They only gave me 20 hours to go before a hearing, and I won. And here's my question then, sir, for you. Where are the Native American federal judges? I'm qualified, I'm here.
Thank you, Angela.
I have no request for money. I have no request for funding. I have no criticism. I have no criticism because I'm in there struggling, trying to contribute too. So I don't even have the answers. So how am I going to sit here and look at this panel for not having them? And heck, the Air Force taught me a lot. I'm a veteran, you know. We're dealt to deal with war. But you know what? That's a war that, heck, the Department of Defense couldn't give me what I needed for that war. So I just want you to know, I looked at and saw 3 of my colleagues in here that are also qualified to be federal judges. When do I get to take, all I'm asking, when do I get to take my experience from the bench in Indian country to the federal bench and take that understanding for our people? That's all I'm asking.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me say, at this point, Ron, what I just want to say to you is we have a lot of work we have to do in the housing arena, and obviously you and Sean Donovan, Secretary Donovan has already stated his commitment to working on housing issues. To the Department of Justice and to Homeland Security, we have a lot of work obviously ahead of us, working with tribal communities to deal with the issues which have been raised here. And obviously, this cannot be done just by the executive branch alone. So having Congressman Cole and Congresswoman Stephanie Sandlin Herseth being a part of this effort is ultimately what will make it work. I want to make just 3 closing comments. I know a lot of people that have questions here, but we have another panel and another set of cabinet officers that are coming here in just about 3 minutes. And these are these. There are 4 points. The first is that this is not easy because we're looking at 233 years since this country was founded, where there's been a lot of persecution, oppression, and neglect. And even in the last 8 years, there was no attention, frankly, to the issues of Native American country here in Washington, D.C. We're trying to change that, but it's not easy. But in the first 9 months, I can say that you have seen President Obama's commitment to working on these issues by making sure that we are investing big amounts of money through the Economic Recovery Act that are going into tribal communities. Second of all, you have seen the budgets of the various departments as they deal with Native American issues have significant increases even in these very difficult times in this budget for 2010. And third, what you see is this conference where the President has called everyone together here to the nation's capital to put a spotlight on these issues. And finally, Angela, to your point that you raised relative to this administration and federal judges and Native Americans, this I can guarantee each and every one of you in this room, that there has never been a president of the United States who cares so much about an inclusive America, and that includes having Native Americans at the table. That's why there are people like Larry Echohawk in my department, and people like Hillary Tompkins, the first Solicitor General of the Department of Interior. So we have a lot of work to do, but this president is committed to having an inclusive America and inclusive government. Thank you all very much, and we'll be back in 5 minutes for the next panel.